Well, I'm back with a video in a series that I have not done in a long time, and that is a personal histories video. My personal histories with gaming. And I really thought I had covered everything. I got the 8-bit, the 16-bit era, my high school years, and things like that. Really captured what I thought were the best times in my life in gaming. And then it occurred to me that I missed one really important stage in my life as a video game enthusiast, and that was my time in grad school. So I want to talk about why gaming became newly important to me when I was in grad school, and perhaps you heard, I think I talked about this in my interview with Johnny Millennium. When I went to college, I kind of dropped off with gaming for two reasons. One, when I got to school, I just wasn't living with roommates who were into gaming as I was, JRPGs, the wide variety of games. These are people who played Madden and Grand Theft Auto, and that was that. And then 2 years into college, I moved to Europe. And in Europe, I did 2 years of college there. In Europe, at that time, early 2000s, not a lot of young people were gaming, and I just kind of gave it up. And it wasn't until I got back to the States, finished up college in the States, and graduated that I kind of got back into gaming, but not seriously. It wasn't until I was 24, 25, I can't remember exactly how old I was when I got to grad school, but around that age. And it turned out that this whole experience, being in graduate school for 3 years and getting into games, was probably the best time that I had in my life. And it was for a couple of reasons. One, I went to a grad school that was located in a part of the country where it was pretty cheap to live. So I was able to actually buy a house as a graduate student because I was getting a stipend and for teaching a couple classes. And it turned out that the real estate market was so low at that point that I could easily afford a house. I think my mortgage payment, including an HOA fee at that time, was like $400 or $500 a month. So it was literally cheaper than renting. And it wasn't a great house, but it was a nice little small duplex. And it was the first time in my life where I got to have the man cave experience. Let me build, everything I want into this house. And it started off slowly. It started off with me getting my first HD TV and a PlayStation 3 console. This was, again, in 2007, so it wasn't right in the launch window, but shortly thereafter. And I started off with just that. I got my big Samsung DLP, LED DLP television, PlayStation 3, and a couple of PlayStation 3 games. Hooked it into my old receiver and sound system, and I had big screen gaming for the first time in my life. And I played a lot of Virtua Tennis 3, and I talked about Virtua Tennis 3 being a great sports game, but if you remember back to the early days of the PlayStation 3, there weren't a ton of games out, and Virtua Tennis 3 was probably my favorite in that initial launch window. But it didn't stop there. PlayStation games, whenever they came out, I was all over them. And one of the big releases, and I think longtime listeners of the channel will be surprised by this, was Call of Duty Modern Warfare, that first new Call of Duty game. The World War II stuff didn't interest me, but this game looked unique. And boy, putting that in and having you got to remember, at this time, the idea of a PC-style shooter on a home console was a new thing. So, it looked great. It sounded great. I remember blasting the receiver and shaking the house, as it were. But I could do it because I wasn't living with anyone, and no one cared. So the great sounds design in that game, bullets flying everywhere and stuff like that. So that was a big PlayStation 3 game for me. Another one, and this really kind of defined a lot about my grad school gaming, was Elder Scrolls 3 Oblivion. And I mentioned that is really one of the hallmark games. But when I got that in 2017, it was really the last, 2007, looking back from 2017, that was really one of the last times where I was truly wowed. Like, this game felt significantly bigger, significantly better than anything I had played before. Now, granted, I hadn't played Morrowind or anything like that, so it's really my first look at a Bethesda game. And I was obsessed with this game. You know, I'd play it nonstop, and it was a sort of thing where I would kind of put off, you know, doing the work that I needed to do to just spend some more hours in this game. So those were, I would say, the three games that really defined that time for me. Now, granted, I'm in retrospect, maybe Call of Duty 4 came out a little bit later, or Call of Duty Modern Warfare came out a little later. But there were some other interesting games or downloadable titles for the PlayStation 3 that I really liked. One of them was Tekken Dark Resurrection, Tekken 5 Dark Resurrection, which I thought, and I think to this day, is the best Tekken game. It had everything I wanted about Tekken, old school feel, smooth 60 FPS. I actually just picked it up for the PSP, and it's great on the PSP, and it's great emulated on the PSP as well. So that was a terrific game. Another one was Afterburner Climax. And again, this is all bleeding together. Maybe Afterburner Climax came out in 2009 and not 2007, but still on the same setup, big screen television. A wonderful Afterburner game. And then also, believe it or not, there was the Sudoku game on the PS3. And it was actually, for whatever reason, this was, I think, the first downloadable game that I picked up. It might have been free for like the first 50 puzzles, and then you had to buy the next 50 or something like that. But I remember I bought it because my parents came to visit. You know, they wanted to see the house, and my father liked Sudoku, so I put it on there, and he was playing it. And that, since it was the first game I purchased digitally, that ring, that sound, is still what I hear when I think about firing up the PlayStation 3 for the longest time. So those are my PlayStation 3 games that I really enjoyed. Now, as my time in grad school went on, I had a little bit more control over my schedule. And I was looking one day at you'd sign up for everything on the computer. And I noticed that if I had just moved a couple classes around, I was teaching on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And some of the classes that I had to take only met once a week. And it just so happened that a couple of them were on Tuesday and Wednesday. And then one, I had a choice between one that met on Monday and one that met on Thursday. So I arranged my schedule. I think this was for 2 semesters, where I would only have to be on campus for Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So I had a 4-day weekend every weekend for a year. Now, those 3 days I was on campus, I had to be there for like 12 hours or longer just because of the way the classes were staggered. And I was like, okay, I'm fine with that. If I have to have like a 4-hour break in between classes, that was fine. So I'd get there at like 7:30 a.m. Maybe I want to say that I taught at 8 or 8:30, something like that. And then I took 2 classes, and the other one started started at like 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock at night or something like that. So I was there for a long time. And I would just get my work done, and Thursday night would roll around. Thursday night was my night. This was what I looked forward to. I would drive on the way home, because I didn't really live near the college, because I got such a good deal on a house. I was about a 10-15 minute drive away. So on my way home, I would stop off. There was this shopping center. It had a Best Buy, it had a GameStop, and it had a really good pizza place run by guys from Lebanon, I believe. And I was always surprised that I was, not nowhere near any good pizza in the country. But these Lebanese guys made a good pizza. So I get a pizza from them. And I'd go in, maybe it was a little bit earlier than 9, because I want to say GameStop closes at 9. So maybe the class was from 6 to 8 or something like that. But I would get to GameStop or Best Buy kind of before they closed. I was like the only person there. And especially in GameStop, I would pick up just anything. I would go to usually the PS2, aisle and sort of look at that point the games are heavily discounted, and I want to say for like $25, I could get a handful of games. And a lot of the times that they weren't in a case or anything like that. But one of the games that I picked up was Persona 3. And Persona 3, I remember going home, and I had the pizza, I had a couple beers. By the way, this is this is just a way to gain weight like you can't believe, just doing this every week. Pizza, beer, games at the end of a long week. But anyway, I actually want to say that I watched, and this is actually pretty funny, I watched TNA Impact, because that was on around the time that I got home. So I'd eat the pizza, drink the beer, or some of it anyway, and I'd watch TNA Impact. I don't know why I did this. It was a terrible show, but I was kind of hoping that it would become a WWE alternative. Obviously, it didn't. And then I popped in Persona 3, and this was the first Persona game I'd ever played, and I was just blown away by it. I had such a great time with that game. So that was another game I had. I had Oblivion going during the day. On my Friday, I would start the day off with Oblivion and end with Persona 3. This was amazing. I had 4 days of gaming, 4 straight days. You gotta picture this. I'm a guy in my mid-20s. I have no responsibilities other than to show up 3 days a week at school, and then I had the weekends to myself. Now, inquiring minds might say, well, how come I wasn't out dating or whatever? And I found it where I was. This particular school, and I'm not going to give away all the details about where I went and what I did. I've always tried to remain somewhat private on here. But anyway, this particular school and the programs that I was in, it was horrible for meeting women. Absolutely terrible. So it wasn't like I could go out partying, and I was living in relative isolation, but this combination of doing what I actually loved at school. I loved the teaching. I loved the classes that I was taking. I enjoyed writing the papers. I was kind of a nerd. And then coming back home and playing games was just an amazing combination for me. And I think it went back even back to when I was a kid. My parents had a rule. You gotta do your work, and then you can game. And so for me, gaming was always the reward. And in grad school, it was like, okay, I've got these 3 12-hour days. And then my reward was gaming as much as I want to whatever extent I wanted over the weekend. So, it was a magical time, and I think one of the reasons why it didn't hit me sooner is because now I'm old enough to look back on it. When I started the channel, we were still coming out of the PS3 era. I was still in that mode, but now I'm actually having nostalgia for the late 2000s. So some other interesting things happened at this time. I started to really expand my gaming horizons. I was purely a console gamer for a long, long time. And I decided I was going to get into PC gaming. And this was awesome. I was living not too far from a Tiger Direct store. And if you don't remember what that was, Tiger Direct, still around today. I think it was bought by someone. But it used to be this great, kind of like Newegg before Newegg. You get a lot of computer parts, and they had like Overstock, something like that. So, I'm on a budget. And I want to say what I did was I got was it a Gateway? It was a computer with a pretty strong Athlon processor, which was good at the time, I guess. And then I went to Tiger Direct, and I bought a new power supply, I bought RAM, and I bought, I think it was a NVIDIA GT 8600. So I gutted what was in the computer, put in all the new stuff, and used that graphics card, and I returned to games like Civ and Quake and things like that I had played a long, long time ago. Unreal Tournament, I was a big fan of that. And then I discovered a lot of new games, like the digital download services were starting up at that time. So I got Sega Rally Revo or something like that from, I think, a service called Direct to Drive, which, interestingly enough, it went out of business, but you can actually still download your games. So I actually went back and I downloaded everything from 2008, 2009, and so it was pretty interesting. Dirt 2, I think, was big then as well. But the one game that I spent a lot of time with was, I think it was called Star Trek Voyager Elite Force. It was a Star Trek first-person shooter, and it was a little bit older than kind of the graphics card generation that I had in this computer. And it looked great, and I put a ton of time into that. I absolutely loved getting back into PC gaming, playing this Star Trek Elite Force game, and then I went out and I got a Logitech G25 and played GTR 2, which is an amazing racing game. So it was my first kind of real PC setup. Now, another thing that happened to me was that I found that as school got a little bit more intense, I needed to just do something to take a break, just do something totally different from what I was doing. And that's when I started to, in a very kind of crude way, learn a little Japanese and get, I would say, reacquainted with Japanese culture, which was really cool when I was sort of in middle school, high school. But, I just kind of let it in the past. And so I got a little bit back into anime, and I'll show you how out of touch I was. I was shocked to know that it was like computer generated at this point, which I didn't care for. But I found a site where I could watch Japanese wrestling. And I sort of, you would, as a wrestling fan, you would hear about Misawa and Kobashi and all of that stuff. And you'd read about it in the Wrestling Observer. And I had, I want to say I'd gotten a couple, like, crude videos back in the day. Again, I had a buddy who was, like, into tape trading and stuff like that. But now that those matches were on YouTube, and there was a site that actually people would pool that material, and you could download these old Japanese wrestling shows. And this kind of led me to import gaming, because I heard about a game called King of Colosseum and King of Colosseum 2, and other Japanese wrestling games. But this was Fire Pro Wrestling, just in 3D. And I was like, how can I get these games? So I figured out how to mod my PS2, which was a big deal back then. And I picked up King of Colosseum, there were 2 discs. There was like a red disc and a green disc, so I got that. And then King of Colosseum 2, which I think came out in 2005. And honestly, they weren't great games. Just Fire Pro in 3D didn't work. They were needlessly complex. But I picked up other games too, like Wrestle Kingdom. Basically, any Japanese wrestling game I could get my hands on, I started importing. And that led me to import other games. And then eventually Fire Pro Returns. That came out around the same time, so I was playing that game. And, the ball just kept on rolling. I modded the PS2, so I was playing Fist of the North Star, the great... And it's so terrible this game was never re-released. Fist of the North Star, a Sega fighting game. It's more like an Arc System Works fighting game, probably put out by Sega. And it was absolutely terrific. Fate Stay Night, a Capcom 3D Tekken-ish fighting game. So I just kept on letting the imports roll in. So, again, a new thing that I discovered. Another thing that I had discovered at this point, but that had been going on for a while now, was YouTube gaming. Well, not the YouTube gaming site, but gaming content on YouTube, particularly with Classic Game Room, which was the first channel that I discovered doing this. And I was like, wow, there's a channel. Previously YouTube, I just thought was like stupid one-off videos, but hey, here's a guy who's making good quality, high production value video game reviews here on YouTube. And then I discovered Happy Console Gamer and his stuff, and I kind of said, wow, here I am buying games, and of course I had brought all of the games that I had owned as a kid down to the house with me. And I said, I'm, I guess, part of this community. I'm part of this retro gaming community, so I began to start collecting. And I started off with actually 2 things. In my bedroom, I remember I dug out the old Sony Trinitron 27-inch television. I hooked up my N64, and I had imported Virtua Pro Wrestling 2 at that point, so I wanted to play that. And then I found for $20, shipped in good condition, still works today, a Sega Dreamcast. And I started buying Sega Dreamcast games. And the Dreamcast was a system that I never had. So this was really one of my first opportunities to really, I would say, relive some aspects of the past that I had missed. So I played like the NFL 2K games, Daytona. One of those shooters, was it Mars Matrix or something like that? Gigawing. Again, picking these up, they were not that expensive at this time. Now, you'd have to mortgage your house to play those games. So I would actually move on these weekends. I kind of like 3 stations. I had my PS3, modern gaming station, if you want to call it that, in the family room. I would go out and have my PC, my kind of crude, not terribly powerful, but nonetheless effective gaming PC with my G25 racing wheel, which I ultimately sold because I was like, this is a pain in the neck to hook up or whatever. I don't know why I did it. I had a good time with it while I had it. So I had the PC stuff going. First started getting into emulation at that point, and it really got crazy because then I got like 2 other computers, and I had this 3-computer L-shaped desk. And so I'd go and I'd hang out in there, and then I would go into the bedroom to sort of end the day with the Dreamcast, all on my incredible 4-day weekend. So now, 8 to 10 years removed from this time in my life, it was really great. I have to say that, and I know it sounds weird because I'm basically living in complete isolation, which I kind of still do today, I guess. But, I have more responsibilities and stuff like that, got out of a relationship, and I was doing that for 5 years. But back then, it was just me, my work, doing a lot of writing. And to get my degree, I had to produce a long research-based piece of writing. So I was writing during the day, gaming at night. This was after my year of 4-day weekends was over. But I just had a blast doing this. And it's interesting. I recently I had to actually go back and do I'm doing a graduate program now, albeit just as a form of a professional advancement tax and not for any kind of love of knowledge. But nonetheless, I still have that feeling like, I was really down on gaming. You saw me come on this channel and you hear me complaining, I think rightfully so, about the state of gaming. And yet, even still, when I finish my work for this week and, now I don't have a 4-day weekend, I, have a weekend, a normal weekend. And sometimes I'm so busy that I only get, rather than 4 days of gaming, I get 4 hours of gaming. But I still find that, I've finished my work and I can go, and the games, it's just all that much more enjoyable for me. So, I don't know. It's interesting to see what you guys think. Is there a time in your life that you can look back on that sort of, where you didn't have the responsibility and stuff like that? For me, it was grad school, and for me, it was the gaming culture of the mid to late 2000s that doesn't seem that far gone and isn't considered retro, but has, over the past, I would say, year and a half, become incredibly nostalgic for me.